So the Pope, a Disney producer, and a porn star walk into a bar. We wish this was a joke. Joining us now is our Rome correspondent, Dr. Jules Gomes. So, Jules, what did the Pope actually say to the porn star?
Hello, Brad. This isn't a funny joke for faithful Catholics. And if you want the answer to that, the Pope told the porn star that Catholic catechesis on sexuality is still in diapers, basically infantile, and the Catholic Church needs to do some potty training with regards to teaching on sexuality.
Okay, now all this came out during a Spanish documentary that aired this past Wednesday during Holy Week. Can you tell us the name and a little bit about this Spanish documentary?
Well, the Spanish documentary was shot by Disney, commissioned by Disney, and shot in June 2022. And here the Pope has 10 young Spanish-speaking interlocutors between the ages of 20 and 25, basically from Spain, Senegal, Argentina, Peru, Colombia, and the United States. And they fire at him all sorts of questions. Most of those questions are, what we might categorize under the label of woke and anti-Catholic issues.
Okay, well, why is Francis doing a documentary with a woman and others, this woman who actually creates internet pornography?
Well, he hasn't really told us. He clearly doesn't seem to be intent on evangelizing them. But Alessandra, this woman who creates internet pornography, challenges him and tells Francis that she's doing this to feed her daughter. And since she's begun to sell pornography on the internet, she has more time to spend with her daughter. Well, to his credit, Francis affirms, first of all, the positive aspect of the internet, but then goes on to tell her that, if you sell drugs through the network, you are intoxicating young people, you're causing damage, you are fomenting a crime. And basically, he does tell her that it is immoral.
Well, good for that. What's the context in which Francis tells the young people that the church needs potty training in sexual ethics?
Well, they ask him about masturbation among a host of other things. And, while the church has not had a particularly stellar record on sexual ethics from the time of Augustine to Pope John Paul's theology, Pope John Paul II's theology of the body, Francis, as usual, is a flabby and very unclear about what aspect of the Catholic Church's teaching on sexuality he is addressing.
So, clearly, let's jump into the producers for a minute. So clearly the producers have assembled a group of provocative characters, many of whom defy Catholic teaching. Who's next in line for a papal medal?
Speaking of the producers, Jordi Evole and Marius Sanchez, both of them actually told the Pope up front that this would be a no-holds-barred documentary. They also point-blank told him they were not Catholic at all. They valued it as something cultural, but they were not interested in the faith side of Catholicism. And then there is this Milagros from Argentina, a woman who tells the Pope, believe it or not, that she is a Catholic catechist and a pro-abortion activist. And she actually hands Francis a green scarf on which it is inscribed, "Free, safe, and voluntary abortion." Now, Francis accepts the scarf, and then he says something very interesting. Now, listen to this carefully. He tells her that he has always urged his priests to accompany women who are having abortions by not asking too many questions and being merciful as Jesus was. He then, of course, goes on to say that abortion is biologically, and clinically, clearly an act of taking a human life. And he uses his standard line about hiring a hitman to get rid of somebody.
So basically, that's how Pope Francis is dealing with the issue of abortion.
Looks like it.
Well, now, the Pope is asked about dating apps, isn't he, during that documentary? What does he respond to about that question?
It's fascinating that despite the massive scandal regarding the use of Grindr, the homosexual hookup app used by prominent clergy like Monsignor Jeffrey Burrell and a number of high-ranking Vatican officials inside the Vatican, Pope Francis is totally oblivious of apps like Tinder, a dating app which also has special features that almost green light married men and women to have adulterous relationships. And so he basically says that it's normal for young people to use Tinder and kind of approves of the use of Tinder. Thank God, not Grindr. Small mercies in the interview, Brad.
Yes, really. Well, let's jump to a girl named Chalia, one of the 10 he's talking to. A girl here who identifies as non-binary, if there can even be such a thing philosophically. What does she ask Francis?
Well, what is the position of the church on non-binary LGBT people? And Francis again says, he says, every person is a child of God. God does not reject anyone. God is Father. And I have no right to kick anyone out of the church. Not only that, says Francis, my duty is to always welcome. The church cannot close the door to anyone, to nobody. And then, quite disturbingly, he goes on to criticize those who use the Bible as a text to exclude LGBT people and justify their exclusion from the church. And he says these people are infiltrators who take advantage of the church for their personal passions, for their personal narrow-mindedness. It is one of the corruptions of the church.
Well, meanwhile, none of that addressed the actual question. Nobody's kicking anybody out of the church and all this nonsense. That's quite a straw man argument on that part. In the essence of time here, let's move on. What does Francis have to say also to Lucia, an ex-nun who's no longer a practicing Catholic nor even a Christian?
Well, he says, this doesn't scandalize me. The fact that your convent was a place of corruption, your convent dehumanized you. It's basically a sort of blah that has no incisive momentum to it, the usual stuff on zero tolerance that he will also go on to spout to another person who talks to him.
Yeah, we know how zero tolerant he is with Rupnik and others there. Let's go to a young boy who was abused by an Opus Dei priest. There was one young boy. Can you dial us in on that?
Yes, this boy, he tells Francis he was abused sexually when he was 11, I think, by an Opus Dei member. And this case went up to the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. And the boy says that they restored the abuser to the ministry and gave him back his good name. And interestingly, in this case, we are told, not in the documentary, that Francis ordered the review of the case and expressed his sorrow for his acts. And he goes on to say that in such cases, there can be no statute of limitations.
Okay, let's talk to the producers. Who produced this documentary and what's their agenda?
Well, it's Disney, Jordi Evole and Maria Sanchez. As I said, both of them are not Catholic. And we know, Brad, Church Militant has reported this over many, many months, that Disney is one of the most radically pro-LGBTQI plus entertainment giants in the world. In fact, they pulled funding from the Boy Scouts because the Boy Scouts would not compromise on their LGBT, on their position on traditional marriage. Ron DeSantis also ordered their tax status to be scrapped because of the LGBT issue. And they have made a claim that in a very short time, more than at least 50% of their characters will be LGBT characters, and also those from ethnic minorities. So it's a major puzzle as to why Pope Francis would patronize and give airtime to such an anti-Catholic and anti-human media giant.
Yeah, I wouldn't let my kid within 50 feet of Disney these days. Our viewers can go ahead and type Disney onto our Church Militant site and find out, just read myriad of articles on that woke corporation. Well, that's all we have time for today. Jules, thank you very much for bringing all that context to this fast-paced news story and helping our viewers make some sense of a rather sensational story.
Thank you, Brad.